All right. Good morning. Happy Friday, EO Nashville. Thank you for joining us for our 28th installment of the EO Exchange series. Today's topic is assessing new hires for a cultural fit. We have time set aside at the end of Justin's presentation today for some Q&A. So as questions pop up throughout, feel free to go ahead, just drop them in the chat and we'll tackle those in the back half of our hour. This is our biggest attendance to date. We had more than 80 RSVPs for this exchange, which is awesome. So on behalf of the Learning Committee, we are so excited to welcome our Strategic Alliance partner, Justin Cook with EOS, to tackle this very timely topic with us. Justin is a professional EOS implementer who has dedicated his life to creating great places to work, helping business owners and leadership teams close the gap between the results they want and the results they're getting. He works with leadership teams to help them get aligned on vision, gain traction on achieving that vision, and get and stay healthy as a leadership team by implementing a set of simple, practical tools and proven concepts. A very fun fact about Justin, he is a Top Gun super fan. His dogs are named Maverick and Charlie, and all of their commands are Top Gun related, which is awesome. I think I heard there's a reboot coming of that. So the jury will be out to see how they do. Hopefully they do it justice. As we can all see from our attendance today, we're very eager to learn what culture fit is, what it isn't. We're excited to learn some new ways, some tools to equip ourselves to properly assess our new hires. And we are so thankful to have all of you here and to hear from Justin. So I will turn the time over to him.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate you reading that introduction exactly how I wrote it. I will Venmo you later. I'm going to share my screen and just pull up a deck to go through with you guys. And thank you so much for being here. I was so excited to talk about this topic. This is something that I am very passionate about. So let me go in here. And can everybody see my screen? All right. So assessing new hires for culture fit. Several years ago, when I was an HR leader, I had a candidate that I was bringing in for a position that had been open for months. And I was really excited because everything looked right. We had, my HR coordinator had interviewed her. I had interviewed her. Her resume was impeccable. I think I have the wrong screen shared. Let me see real quick. Give me 2 seconds.
We were looking at a slide deck, it looked like, Justin.
Okay. Let me make sure. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, we're good.
So we had interviewed her. We were super excited about her. She seemed like a fit. The resume was great. Her references could not say enough great things about her. And we brought her in for the interview with the hiring manager, who was also one of the owners. And I thought, okay, this is just gonna be a formality. So they had the interview. I went to meet with the hiring manager afterwards. I said, all right, so are we ready to move forward? And she said, well, I'm not sure. I think she might not be a culture fit. And my heart sank because we had been working on this position for so long. I said, well, what do you mean she's not a culture fit? And she said, well, I was doing a little digging on her social media. Oh no, my heart sank a little further. Okay, what did you find? She said, well, it looks like she has her teeth sharpened. I said, her teeth sharpened? What are you talking about? She said, I think she sharpened her canines like a vampire. I said, whoa, like a vampire? What are you talking about? She said, yes. I looked on, she's got all these pictures where she's dressed in all black and she's got her teeth and it looks like she got them intentionally sharpened. I said, okay. And she's like, well, I mean, we're not like that here. I said, okay, well, what do you mean by that? You know, we're not goth. I thought, all right, so we're not goth. Was there anything in the interview that gave you red flags about her ability to do the job, about her potential performance? She said, oh, no, nothing like that. And I'm not judging her. I just, you know, if she was dressed in all black, walking around, like, that's just not who we are. And I said, okay. And I reached into my back pocket and I got my wallet out and I had a little card in there that had our core values on it. And I read through each core value word and the statement we had supporting it. I said, was there anything in any of these that gave you a red flag during the interview, right? That she might not be aligned with these? She said, oh, no, not at all. Okay. Was there anything on her social media that made you think she might not be aligned with our core values? She said, no, not at all. So, okay, so she's not a culture fit because she doesn't dress like us. And ultimately, we came to she was a great culture fit because she shared our core values. And we hired her, and she was one of the best employees we had. And she fit our culture like a glove, and people loved her, right? Even if she did have sharp teeth. And so I tell that story because I think it's really important when we start talking about assessing new hires for culture fit, that we're clear on what culture means. And ultimately, when we're talking about culture, culture is just a byproduct of your core values, right? It's not dressing the same. It's not having the same views. It's not having the ping pong tables or kegs or pool or whatever. It's about your core values. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. And when we talk about core values, one thing that I want to make clear, you know, I could talk about core values all day. That's not what we're here for. I'm going to assume that all of you have core values. If you haven't written them out, you still have them. You just haven't discovered them yet. But whether you have them or not, I want you to be really careful if you're going to start using them for hiring. In a Harvard Business Review article called Making Your Values Mean Something, Patrick Lencioni talks about the values traps we can fall in. And there's permission to play, accidental, and aspirational. And I want to key in on that accidental one. If you're going to start using your core values in the hiring process, make sure that you review them and you don't have any that are accidental. An example of this would be a client of mine that, as we were reviewing their core values, they had one that was adaptable. And what they meant by that was this person will do whatever job we ask them to do. They're not tied to a particular role. They like trying all the different things. And as we talked about it, we realized that they were a startup turning into a real company. And when they first started, they needed adaptable. And a lot of the people there were adaptable, and that was a good thing. But as they became more established, they actually needed people that were satisfied in a specific role and weren't constantly trying to jump out of that into different things. And so they discovered and changed that core value, right? This isn't one of our core values anymore. So I just wanted to give that as if you're going to start doing this, make sure that your core values really are core to who you are as an organization. So let's talk about what it looks like to use your core values to assess that culture fit. Well, it starts with assessing your candidates. And I want to dispel the notion that you can get perfect at this, that there's anything I can teach you that's going to guarantee you hire somebody that's a culture fit. Because people are tricky sometimes, and they say what you want to hear. The best thing we can do is increase our odds of getting the right person. And there's two things I want to talk about on this point. One is using values-based questions during the interview process. And the second is giving them the speech. So let's talk about that first one. Values-based questions. It's really easy in the interview process to come up with the different technical questions, or maybe even, what style do you work? How do you like to do things? But what you want to do is you want to lay out your core values and look at each one and figure out questions you can ask that are going to tell you how that person lives that core value. Now, this can be a little intimidating. I get questions about this all the time. Okay, but how do we do that? So I want to go through a few examples. Let's say you've got a core value of humility. Now, you can make this as simple as, tell me about a time that you had to show humility, right? And when you're asking these questions, start asking for real examples, right? Not just what would you do, not hypotheticals, but tell me about a time. But what I'd love and what I think is way more effective is if you can go a little deeper than that surface question, right? Tell me about a time, because now they know humility is important and they're going to come up with something good, right? But maybe something like, tell me about a time you were absolutely sure of something, but turned out to be wrong. As they tell that story, you're going to hear how they reacted. You're going to hear how they pushed for what they wanted, and then what happened when they were wrong and how they responded to that, right? Another example, let's say curiosity is one of your core values, right? Well, maybe you could ask a question like, what are the last 3 books you read? Or tell me about a new concept you've learned and how you applied it at work. Maybe tenacity or being tenacious is a core value. Tell me about a project you worked on that followed Murphy's Law. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And through that story, you're going to hear where they gave up, where they pushed through, how they pushed through. Tell me about something you gave up on. Man, that's a scary thing for somebody to answer, right? But even if your core value is tenacious, you don't want to throw good money after bad. You still want people that know when the time is right to move on. Last one, maybe you've got a core value of teamwork. Tell me about the best and worst team experiences you've ever had. And you're going to start to hear somebody say, I've never had a good team experience because I just really like working alone. Every team I've ever been on, I end up doing all the work, blah, blah, blah. And you start to wonder, okay, well, every team you've been on, maybe you're the common denominator. Maybe teamwork is not one of your core values, right? So I give those examples just to get you thinking, and this is something I'm happy to connect and talk about anytime. I'm super passionate about this stuff, but dig deep to find those questions, to get them to tell you a story where you can see those core values lived out. Now, once you've done that, the next thing you want to make sure that you're doing as part of your interview process is you're giving them the speech. Now, here's what I mean by the speech. Your core values are probably a word or a phrase. And I see this all the time, even amongst leadership teams that I work with, where they define the word or phrase differently, right? When I hear tenacious, I define that differently than when somebody else does. I had a client recently, and one of the core values they suggested was blunt. And I heard that, I was like, oh, that doesn't seem good. But what she was really talking about was candor, being honest with people. And so it's not enough to just share your core values. You need to be able to make those core values come alive. And the best way to do that is have a speech about them. Now, I'm not talking about some big dramatic thing, But take each core value and give it 3 to 5 bullet points where you're telling a story about that core value. You're giving an analogy, maybe an example or an anti-value. This is what it doesn't look like, right? To make sure that when people hear your core value, they're hearing it the way you define it. And every one of your hiring managers needs to be able to give the same speech. Because the last thing you want in assessing culture fit is having people with different definitions of core values, right? And of those 4 things there, I cannot stress enough the importance of examples. Examples make things real. Until then, it's a concept. But if you can give an example, even better, of somebody living that core value in your business and what that looks like, that is so powerful, and it's really going to drive that home. I'll give you an example of what this might look like at the end. This is actually the core values speech for EOS Worldwide, right? Our core values are be humbly confident, grow or die, help first, do the right thing, and do what you say. And we talk about this all the time. And I remember when I was first becoming an EOS implementer, they gave me this speech. And here's how they led into it. Hey, you seem like you'd be a good fit, but I want to do something. I want to go over our core values with you. We take these core values seriously. It is not just words on a plaque. You have to live these core values day in and day out. And I'll tell you, if these don't resonate with you, you're still an okay person, but it's not going to be a good fit here. And I would much rather you just realize that and not accept this job than come here and us have to fire you, because we will. We will root you out if these aren't a fit. Try to scare them away with your core values, because if they're the right person, if they're a culture fit, that will resonate, because they'll have been somewhere where the core values were just a poster on the wall. And they were stuck working with people that were not great to work with and didn't fit the culture. So lead into it with that, and then make your core values come alive with the speech. Now, once you've hired somebody, like I said, you can't guarantee that their core values fit. The best you can do is hope that you've made the right decision. And so with the new hire, you've got to start assessing them immediately. The best thing to do is look at this in the first 90 days. The best organizations that I work with are the ones that don't overthink the hiring process, right? They do their best to find the right fit, but they are so rigorous during that first 90 days, scheduling weekly or every other week check-ins with the manager where they are having open and honest feedback, and they are calling out where the core values or performance are lining up with expectations and where they're falling short. So be really intentional, whatever the right pulse is for you, to be watching for those red flags or yellow flags, or even better, green flags. If they're a fit, start recognizing that right away. Embrace that culture of recognizing and rewarding your core values, because that's just they're gonna come in and be sort of like a shot in the arm to your organization, right? Fresh blood with those core values. So treat that first 90 days as sacred. If you can make your decision, and you don't have to wait 90 days, you can do it in 30 if you need to. But if you can head off a bad hire at the pass within the first 90 days, you're fine. It's not going to have those disastrous effects on your organization. Now, I want to share with you a tool that we use as part of the EOS process to help evaluate whether someone is a core values or a culture fit. It's a tool called the People Analyzer, and it's really simple. And when you see it, you may say, oh, that seems too easy. But I promise you, if you're making it more complicated than this, you don't have to. So here's how the people analyzer works. We're going to list our core values across the top, and then we're just going to list the names of our new hires or anybody in the organization across the side. And we're simply going to rate them. And we use a very, very simple rating system. If somebody exhibits this core value most of the time, they're a plus. If they don't exhibit it most of the time, they're a minus. And if you're struggling back and forth with which one it is, are they a plus or are they a minus? Oh, they're a plus minus, right? And when you do that, it gives you a really good picture of where people stand. Another really nice thing about using this, which has some subjectivity to it, but it's also pretty objective, is it helps you see where maybe someone doesn't seem like they fit, but they fit your core values, and it's actually, you just need to get over yourself, right? Because they've sharpened their teeth like a vampire. Maybe I hope you don't have that, but whatever it is, this gives you a clear picture of what you're actually dealing with. Now, the other thing you need to do if you use this tool is you need to set the bar. Nobody's perfect. You're going to have some people in your organization that are all pluses, and that's awesome. And you want everybody in the organization to be all pluses, but nobody's perfect. So you're going to identify how many plus minuses are we willing to tolerate, right? And so as you're evaluating that first 90 days, well, if they're 4 pluses and 1 plus minus, absolutely you want to coach them and work them towards being a plus. But if your bar is that you accept 2 plus minuses, then they're a good culture fit, right? They've just got to be at the bar. If they're below the bar, now you've got a really clear picture. I can't tell you the number of times I have clients that are debating whether or not somebody's a fit, and they're going back and forth and back and forth. And I say, have we done the people analyzer? And they've forgotten to do it. So we get it out and we do it. And all of a sudden, everybody's on the same page. Wow, I guess they're not a fit. So use a tool like this. I can send you a copy of the people analyzer. You can download it from usworldwide.com, but simplify how you're evaluating that culture fit. Now, I want to talk briefly about what happens if you don't take action when you identify these things. Because one of the things I hear all the time, especially lately, is, yeah, but I'd rather have, somebody that's 50% than nobody, because that's 0%, right? We're so busy, we can't hire people, we can't find people. We gotta keep them, even if they're not necessarily a fit. We just got to get over that. Well, if they're not a fit because they don't dress like you, okay. But if they're not a fit with core values, that is disaster. You're going to end up with 4 types of people in your organization, right? And if you measure them on core values fit and performance, you're going to have people that are a fit and they've got high performance, and those are your rock stars, right? That is what we want out of everybody. And then you're going to have some people that are not a core values fit and they do not perform great, and those are rats. And rats are pretty easy to get rid of, or they should be. If you're struggling to get rid of rats, get real with yourself. But here's where things get a little tricky. You're going to have some people that are a core values fit, but they can't do the job. As much as I love talking about culture fit, they still got to be able to do the job. Because those people that can't, they're like puppy dogs. They've got those really sad eyes and you love them to death, but they pee all over the place and it's not pleasant, right? Now, maybe you have a different seat where they're great at performance, but if they're not, you got to make a hard decision. And then last, you're going to have people that are not a core values fit, but they're great at the job. And those are the ones that you're going to be really tempted to keep because they hold you hostage like a terrorist, right? That was the least offensive terrorist clip art I could find. And you don't want to let them go because a lot of times they're making you money, right? They're a high performer in sales, or they are super productive. A lot of clients in the trades, and there's somebody that can just run circles around everybody else and get jobs brought in on time. But because their culture is defined by their core values, it is poisoning that culture every day. So I just want to end with a strong encouragement to you, whether it's a puppy dog and you've got the cultural fit, but they can't do the job, or it's a terrorist and they can do the job, but they're not a cultural fit. And you discover that, make the hard decision. Your people will rise to the occasion. I promise you, I've seen it happen over and over and over again. You think you can't survive at that if you let that person go? Well, they could just leave. Or they could be driving along and a chasm could open up and they could fall into it, right? You don't have control over that. And if they did just leave, your team would come together and you would figure it out. So do the right thing for your organization. So that's my sort of quick and dirty version of how we assess new hires for culture fit through the interview process and in that first 90 days. And I'm happy to take questions and do whatever. I'll turn it back over now.
All right, Justin, man, that was awesome. I'm so impressed by how succinct you were able to be and pack so many valuable insights into such simple concepts. And I think that's one of the coolest things about EOS is the way that they have this framework that's packages things so nicely. And I'm really glad that you touched on the concept of not only utilizing our core values when we're assessing new hires, but also the principle of values-based management of our people. I know for me, the hardest ones were always the hipster terrorist on your little rubric there. That's like, these people that are great performers, but that don't fit the culture. Like, man, I always had a really hard time with those, but I thought that was awesome. So I'd love to get some Q's and some A's happening. So it looks like Hunter's gonna kick us off here. Anybody else questions? Let's get them dropped in the chat for Justin. Hunter, if you want to go ahead, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I'm on my phone, so it's kind of hard to type the question. I appreciate it. This was great. The question I have, Justin, you mentioned assuring that all of your management team that may be involved in interviews are sending a consistent message and asking consistent questions. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? We've had some challenges with that, and depending on who's doing the interview, the outcomes have been different in terms of finding the right culture fit. So if you could elaborate on that a little bit and how you go about getting your team consistent, because everybody kind of has their own way of doing interviews and communicating with candidates.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think one of the reasons organizations find themselves in that place is because everybody's had that experience where the interviewer read off a list of questions and it was like, oh my gosh, this is such a waste of time. Everybody already knows these questions. And so the pendulum swings all the way in the other direction where we say, it's free form, do your thing. Everybody's got their own style. And to an extent, it's okay to have your own style, but something that I've done, and I know my clients have done, is one, ask some consistent questions like, have a list of those values related questions. And the expectation is you ask these questions. If you feel silly reading off a list, okay, you're going to have to memorize them. But you need to ask these. And when you're telling us, hey, we want to hire this person or not hire them, I want the answers to these questions. I want notes from your interview. This really depends on the maturity of your managers, how much you have to supervise this or initially coach this. When I first started trying to get our managers doing this better, I sat in on all of their interviews. I was there for every single one so I could give them feedback. I asked a lot of these questions to help, but the goal was really coaching them to be able to do it. And on the values, this is why it's so important to have that speech. It's not being able to deliver this word perfect monologue that's a full page of block text, but it's them hearing it enough, right? You got to repeat yourself often that it becomes second nature, and them having truly those bullet points, right? So that they don't forget, hey, this is the history of this core value here. This is why it's important. Encourage them to have their own examples where they've seen it happen, but you've got to make it as easy as possible for them to do what you want them to do. And if that means, hey, here's your interview guide, you can ask other stuff, but you got to get answers to this stuff. Do that. Does that help?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I've got a follow-on question along those lines. Is there we've become a virtual company, and so the majority or now all of our interviews are online. And I'm wondering if there are pros or cons or dynamics to be aware of when you have, we typically will have two people from the company in the conversation with the candidate. Are there pros or cons? We wouldn't do more than three because then it looks like an inquisition. But as I'm looking at this, the form and thinking it through, I'm wondering if we would be better off getting individual perceptions than we would group. And I just wonder if there are any best practices along those lines.
Yeah, I both and. There's a lot of benefit to having two people because even though you hear the exact same responses, you hear them differently. I can't tell you the number of interviews where we debrief at the end and we go through. We've each got the same sheet and we're evaluating the same things, and somebody said something and it impacted one person a wildly different way than it did the other. So there's a lot of benefit there. Now, the other benefit of having separate is you ask those same questions and you get different answers, right? Even if you do the exact same questions, maybe they tell a different story. Maybe the story has much different details, right? We uncover a little dishonesty. And so I encourage a combination. I think your interview process, it can be mixed up. We would always do a couple individual screens and then a group interview with a hiring manager, maybe myself, maybe the HR coordinator, maybe a couple people. Does that help?
Yeah, big time. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right. Any other questions, either in the chat or we can raise hands and go live? Justin, I really liked the way that you outlined some of those powerful values-based interview questions and kind of looking at the difference of, between on the humility example, the difference of how deep you can go by reframing those. And as a quick experience share, one thing that we started doing was collecting stories from our team. Like we would do them in our regular team check-ins or progress interviews with team members, and we would ask for examples of stories that they experienced either themselves or with a coworker, another team member, of some time that they saw a value, really a good example of when somebody either performed or acted in a way or didn't. And we kind of use those, and we started then being able to utilize those as part of the interview as well. And we had real examples to say, this is a scenario, and what would you do in this scenario? And that was something that kind of worked well for us too. What other questions do we have?
That's a great way to do it.
What other questions do we have for Justin? Okay, we have an experience share from Jolynn, and then we will jump to Jason for a question.
All right, trying to unmute. Hey, I just wanted to pop in. We've engaged with Justin to implement EOS, and we went through that people analyzer with our leadership team, and it was so simple yet so enlightening. I want to say it really clarified some of the questions we had about people and identified people who maybe didn't fit our culture, or maybe it could be leaders within our culture. So I can attest to the effectiveness of that. And just generally speaking, our experience so far with Justin has been fantastic. So if anybody's thinking about moving forward, implementing EOS, I'm happy to share my experience a little more in depth about what we've done so far with him and how it's impacted our leadership team. We have several of our leadership and management team members on this call right now. So we're really starting to share and drill down these concepts. So thank you, Justin. You're awesome.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And reminder to everyone, Justin is one of our strategic alliance partners for the chapter. And I mean, that means we get to bug him and we get to invite him out to our forums. And so just, he's got a wealth of information and experience to share. So encourage and challenge you guys to utilize that. Invite him to your forums. Okay, let's jump over to Jason.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Jason, can you hear me? Okay, cool. I do technical recruiting for a living, so I live in the middle of these conversations on a daily basis with clients and candidates and trying to make those matches. A little bit of an experience share and a little bit of a question. What I find many times is companies themselves, their own culture, they've kind of set it up where it's the Game of Thrones and it's a triangle and every director or VP is trying to get the next job. And then we have compensation plans built for those managers, which are more performance-based versus cultural-based, hit the sales number or produce the new software platform. And so managers tend to hire more for performance because their bonus is part of that and their ability to move up in the company is part of that. So what is your kind of direction to kind of get your arms wrapped around some of that dysfunctionality between, not the CEO, but kind of the folks below there? I mean, my thought is it's probably a top-down thing culturally, but I think the problem starts there, that there's not alignment in the leadership team because people are just focused on what they need to do to be successful.
Yeah, that's a great question. And you've pointed out that this only works if you're willing to get serious about core values, period. And you're absolutely right. It has to start from the top down. And then you do have to look at if your compensation is going to be based and your bonuses and stuff are going to be based on performance. And I don't have any problem with that, honestly. You've got to make sure that you have something else in place to ensure that you're getting the right people, because you got to have both. You got to have right people in the right seats. That's, the Jim Collins thing that everybody knows. And so one way to evaluate that, if they're willing to do that and start that at the top, is performance reviews should have just as much about culture and just as much about your core values as they do performance. We weighted those things equally, right? Our performance reviews were very straightforward. It was, how does this person live out this core value? And if you gave them a plus minus or a minus, you had to give 3 concrete examples of what that was, right? Where they didn't live the core value. Because we don't want to just do intuition or gut feeling. We need to be able to provide specific feedback to our people. And I actually required them to do that for the pluses too, because people deserve positive, specific feedback when they do it right. And then can they do the job was simply, do they get it? Do the neurons connect in their brain to do this job? Do they want it? Do they love doing it? Do they have the capacity to do it? Are they smart enough, experienced enough, mature enough? And then we might add some additional questions there. But ultimately, that core values part of the review process was just as important.
Thank you.
Just as an experience share, we use employee recognition program called Kudos Now, where we can tag core values. And so as our team exemplifies a core value, we can say, hey, Justin, way to go. That was a great example of doing the right thing. And then at the end of the year, we look at all of that, and we actually have core value awards every year for our 4 core values. And we give out, the little crystal trophies that says, Justin won the core value of wow our customers for the year. And so for us, it's like, it's in our language, it's in our vernacular, we talk about it. And from that, Justin, I love how you said, provide examples. We have from that Kudos Now program, we now have just bucos of examples of each of those, and in orientation for our new hires coming in, we can actually talk about, here's an example of what we mean when we say do the right thing. So I've got a couple of my people and culture team members online now, and kudos to them for doing all of that.
That's awesome. Nothing makes me happier than hearing that. I love it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we are going to go ahead and take a few minutes for a short breakout session. Most of you have probably done these EO exchanges with us, but in case you haven't, a part of the EO exchange format is hearing from a wonderful, experienced person like Justin, doing some Q&A, and then also breaking out into smaller groups with a couple of prompts just to have some good engaging conversation around the topic. So we will have a quick survey that somebody is going to put in the chat. Marla, I think.
Just stuck it in there.
It would be so awesome for everyone to very quickly hit that as we're about to break out. Your feedback is super, super helpful. And as we break out into small groups, pick a moderator for your small group just to help conversation. And the prompt questions for today are, what is the first thing you will do when you get off this Zoom to assess your culture fit in regards to new hires? And secondly, with so many takeaways, what will you share with your team that you learned this morning? So fill out that survey, break out for a quick conversation. We'll circle back here together for the last 2 minutes, and then we'll get you out of here on time.
Everybody should have an invitation to join a breakout room. So go ahead and accept that. Everybody see the invitation to join the breakout room? Marla, sorry, I'm moving you around a little bit. You're muted. Say that again. Hold on just a sec. You're muted.
Most excited to meet the new chef at Mere Bowls. We were chatting.
Oh, cool. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Do you want me to put you back?
No, because I think you moved them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine.
Got a little tricky. One of the rooms got real small, so I had to
Gotcha.
shift. Susan, do you see your breakout invitation? Okay, I'm just let it be.
Stacy, Matthew, and I.
All right, I'm gonna go off camera just for a few minutes while I finish something up.
Okay.